Matt, welcome in. What have we just seen? Melbourne City, Marcus Eunice in the 93rd minute of the game. It looked like for so much of that game, the 1-0 was going to be the scoreline. Ulsan come back in the 80th minute, score a goal. All of a sudden, we're looking at some of the other results that have happened in the last 24 hours, and Melbourne City would go into match day 8, still kind of on the cusp, not mathematically safe to progress to the knockouts. But then Marcus Eunice, 93rd minute, sews it up for Melbourne City. Not only secures Australia's first place in the ACL Elite knockouts, it's the first time an Australian team in any version of the top tier of the Asian Champions League in 6 years since Melbourne Victory did it have gone through to the knockouts. And they've locked up a top 5 place, which is crucial. We'll get to that a little bit later. But Melbourne Victory are going to the knockouts. Off the back of what the Central Coast Mariners did, expectations were so low from last season, and Aurelio Vidmar has come and absolutely knocked it out of the water. What a treat it is to see an Australian team perform so well and get some really, really nice results on the Asian stage.
I think immediately just want to pose the question to you. In terms of away victories in the history of this competition, was that the best?
That's tough because City themselves have had good ones this season. Honestly, in the moment, with my heart rate as high as it is, I'm struggling to pinpoint exact moments that I can point to.
There was a playoff against Kashmir Antlers where Andrew Naboo scored for Melbourne Victory. That was in 2017. And that, for me, has probably been one of the best. And respectfully, due to the age of the two of us, if you go back to sort of 07, 08, there's probably some good anecdotes in there for Adelaide as well, but I just don't. We just don't have the mental capacity to talk about it.
Maybe Wanderers away in the final second leg as well.
Yeah, although it was technically a draw, but you are right. Yes, that it was technically a victory. So, yeah, but I mean, that's probably a pretty comfortable top 5 that we've just created right there. And this game we've just witnessed is firmly on that list. So, by all means, what an incredible night for Australian football. And what an incredible show of intent from this City team, where I think things have been a little bit sort of to and fro with their league form, but to know that greater conquest is in mind of, we've got this sort of, dual sort of responsibility going on, and they've really lived up to the billing, because to go away to South Korea and to play like that, it's just such a foreign experience to see something like that happen, and they were superb tonight.
It's exceptional. Okay, so short-term ramifications. Melbourne City, as we say, they're through to the knockouts. They have one more match to play next week back at Amy Park against another South Korean opposition. That match will still be important in terms of potentially climbing higher up the leaderboard, but crucially, they've locked in top 5, which means because the Japanese teams have done so well, they're currently sitting 1, 2, and 3. By sitting 5th, it means, or 4th at the moment, but a lowest of 5th, it means that we will avoid the Japanese sides in the draw for the round of 16, because there's a direct 1v8, 2v7, etc., which means that Melbourne City will not have a possibility of going up in the round of 16 against a team that they lost to in the league phase. Like, this is, you are right in it. Your knockout stage game, look, maybe they won't be favourites, maybe they'll be slight unders, who knows? But you were right in it with a very, very good chance of making that top 8 in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the thing, is that when we look at it on paper, we usually go into these campaigns thinking, here's where the sort of the minimum and maximum expectations are. And just by you talking about the nature of this, City have already really firmly exceeded it, because I think the expectation would have been you go to the knockouts, if you've made it from 6th or 7th or 8th. And we're not talking about that. When we're not talking about the possibility of a Vissel Kobe coming in and, blowing them out of the water. It's just impeccable to be in this situation, right? I also think that what's really, really quite promising about this is looking further down the rest of a potential Asian bracket. A lot of these teams have just really struggled to get their form together across both competitions. It's almost as if collectively the whole continent, and I mean, look, we know obviously what's going on, with the CSL at the moment. We know that the K-League has had a pretty high-profile drop-off in quality. I mean, these leagues are, for whatever reason, going through a bit, and it's almost like they're the ones that are in our usual position of things are a bit of a mess right now, and They're struggling for the form and the consistency. How do they manage both competitions? And it just feels really, really good to be on the other side of that. Where, I mean, again, I don't know that City have the most stability at an A-League level, but that stability has really come through where it's mattered in Asia, and it's a really, really big testament to the current squad that's been assembled and the way that squad's been utilised by Vidmar. Because again, I feel the rotation, the mix of youth and senior players, it's just been phenomenal throughout the whole campaign.
It is, and Aurelio Vidmar, obviously, he had that run with Adelaide United to the final. Now what he's doing with Melbourne City, the reputation of being a specialist in Asia is there now. It feels like that is a concrete part of Aurelio Vidmar's identity. And I was talking with you and some other people on Twitter as well about the idea of how managers in general, but also Aurelio with this Melbourne City side, would go into games in the league with the mindset of the big thing we're doing this year is in the Champions League, and how that frames your approach to A-League games. Are you hamstringing yourself in a certain way to get certain ideas across to your players that are going to be more valuable in a Champions League format rather than the A-League? You're going to find that obviously Melbourne City in the league are going to play against a lot of low blocks and not really allow a lot of room in those dangerous areas. In the ACL Elite, teams aren't going to be as cautious. They're going to step up. They're going to have higher lines, which means not only is there more space in behinds, but the typical Melbourne City strategy of finding lots of overloads in midfield really comes into a successful kind of means in the Champions League Elite. Maybe that is overly generous as well. Maybe they've just not been good in the A-League. I'm not sure, but it's an interesting idea because it really does feel like we're getting a different version of this Melbourne City team in the Champions League compared to in the A-League.
Such a good point, because my mind goes back to the way that they manipulated the game against Selvia, right? And so much of that was about the kind of the kind of wider sort of style of play that they were manipulating. And for whatever reason, it was working out for them, where when they were having their one or two chances, there was always that dangerous ball in the box and always that spare body that was always a bit of a threat. And I mean, Zelvia were pummeling them at certain stages of the game, having sort of 10, 15, 20 shots in the game. But City were able to use those sort of extra numbers going up front and played the counter-attack perfectly well, right? So I think to tactically have found that balance is a really, really special thing. But it comes with that long-term strategy. I think another thing as well is that the City Football Group, I think, would really be the ones in his ear as well, just to say that this is probably what we value far more than continued domestic dominance, especially when they've sort of gotten ahead of their own schedule by winning the championship last season, right? So no, I think it's a really inherently beautiful thing, and it just goes to show that Australian clubs and Australian football, I think we really do like to dog ourselves down a lot, and sometimes it's worth to just ponder on the one or two positives. If there's one thing to learn from what the past 4 or 5 years of being an Australian football fan has really taught us, is that, by the way, our place in the world is actually still pretty high. The standards we can set for ourselves, just by the nature of who we are as a sporting nation, that bar can be set really, really high, and today's a very, very good reminder of that. The whole campaign is. Let's just keep seeing how this City team can kick on.
Right, so that's short-term ramifications. Mid-term ramifications, fours are the coefficient. Coefficient check is really, really positive. We saw Kevin Muscat, Shanghai Port, had a 0-0 draw with Gangwon FC as well. They were already pretty much out. They are now mathematically eliminated, as well as Shanghai Shenhua. John Aloisi's Chengdu lost against Mark Jackson's Buriram United last night, which was a nice little kind of twist as well to A-League coaching alumni. They could still make it through to the top 8, but what we're looking at here is essentially China, who are the nation above us on the rankings. And we talked about this a lot last year. It's been a while, so I'm just trying to remind people. China are that direct competition for an extra qualification spot into the ACL Elite. And now that pretty much all of their teams eliminated, MacArthur helped us out in the ACL too as well with Beijing Guan. It means that Australia really have a pretty good run of getting coefficient points. And by my math and knowledge of the system, pretty much all we need, because Melbourne City are going to get some bonus points now for qualifying for the next phase. All we really need is MacArthur to progress through the round of 16 with Bangkok United, or maybe even one more Melbourne City win and we are going to overtake China, which is massive. It gives us another opportunity to send a team to this competition. And that's not even considering this whole Malaysian FA appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is going to go down in a couple of weeks, which could give us another entry in the ACL 2 as well. So it's just impressive at how much of a distance in terms of the coefficient we've managed to catch up this season. And it could give us even more opportunity in the next couple of seasons.
Yeah, I mean, again, it just goes back to what I was literally just saying a second ago, right? Like,
Yeah.
we ought to give ourselves some credit sometimes, because this has happened by design. Okay, getting the coefficient relegated to the point where we win the AFC Cup, was a thing that happened. But the way that we've actually established ourselves in the second tier, like, you come up against an Australian club in that competition, you're going to have a problem. Those teams are a lock-in to have a deep run, and it's a brilliant thing. And then on the Champions League front, like, we've basically just spelt that out as well. City have found a way to become a winning presence there as well. And it is fortunate in that I feel that, again, the other leagues are clearly having a bit of a moment right now. The National Federation in Malaysia are certainly having a moment. So I don't know. I'm at the point where let's just really be swept up in the optimism of this, because really, again, going back to, that Mariners campaign, things just haven't really looked awful at any point, besides when obviously the Mariners entered the Champions League elite as the AFC Cup winners and were very much out of their depth. But that was very much just a case of that team had already rotated so much from when it already was a championship winning team, and it's a whole other conversation. But I don't know. I feel that there's actually a really, really good breeding ground here for continued and strengthened success in both competitions. You now sort of feed that energy back into how can both leagues live together in an ecosystem where Australian teams don't have to be so strapped with their resources, and how do they actually be able to find that special balance in both. And this is like, if you're at the Jets right now, having won the Cup, start asking these questions, start exploring it. What will it actually take to have a sustained success between both? Because it is so unprecedented.
It is. And you've led me right into it. So the long-term consequences of this as well, I feel is really aimed not even specifically at the clubs themselves, because I feel like they are catching on, but in terms of the public opinion towards these competitions, I think this is massive. Just the understanding, and we've talked about this idea before, that, the Mariners would go into the AFC Cup and it's an embarrassment if they lost a game. Therefore, the stakes are low, and why should I watch? And if you go into the big leagues in the Champions League, the Champions League Elite, the Mariners last year, well, they've got no chance. Stakes are low. They might get one win, but they're never going to progress, and they're never going to challenge for a trophy. The idea that we can break those misconceptions and really turn it into a competition that is not just worth watching, but should have prestige. And, we should be able to turn on to Paramount Plus, and there should be a half an hour pre-show that we don't get. There should be a live studio at halftime talking about the match and some analysis afterwards. We don't get that at the moment. So hopefully what we can see from Melbourne City proving to the public that this competition is the real deal, and not just, a surface level of, okay, it's worth a lot more money, but can we use this to try and generate some prestige around the competition and kind of elevate its status in terms of the Australian football public?
Something else for me is that, like, when you look at the J League as a direct competitor, and certainly a competitor that's so far ahead of us, right? We're at the point where, I'm mindful of using this term because I feel its cultural significance has waned in recent years. But when we look at sort of that Euro snob kind of mentality, right? The archetype for these kinds of people, I feel that the J League is actually on their radar now in a way that it never used to be. Ever since Japan really put themselves on the map, and people now recognise Japan as a top 15 country in the world, one that can go on a knockout run at a World Cup, is easily the best team in Asia. The growth of the J League by an extension, even the small things like the cultural impact of it, the accessibility of it on YouTube, the clothing items that the teams wear and things like this. The fact that just is something that's on the minds of people who are into football and into their sport, to know that there's a degree of separation between your local team and some of those players that are stars at a World Cup level, that is ginormous. And I feel that is really something we've got to dip into, is really say, hey, by the way, like, this is like world famous brand Kawasaki Frontale that's on your doorstep. You know, this is the just a really, really special thing that we ought to encourage. And who knows how seriously, from a financial perspective, the clubs begin to take it, and the sponsorship opportunities. I distinctly remember when Glory were in the Champions League, the state government jumped onto it like that, because they were like, we've had all these strange things over the years, like trying to introduce the AFL into India and China and things like that. This is a competition where a team called Perth is literally flying to, well, obviously COVID got in the way, but they're flying to Shanghai to go play a game. And the government put the sponsorship on the shirt because they're like, this is huge. And yeah, it is. You know, like that is the potential it has in Australian culture and Australian sort of the sporting zeitgeist. So I think once we really just get into the culture of understanding how Australians engage more with Asia, you know, the sky's the limit for the competition. And I mean, come on, people like you and I have been saying this for 20 years. I mean, you know, it feels like we're on the verge of something special happening with it. But like everything, you need to give it time, and you need to give it a bit of growth. And I don't know if you want me to take this angle as early into the show as I'm about to, because we're about to talk about MacArthur and the ACL too. But we've got, you know, Joao Felix and Sadio Mane going to a Central Asian dictatorship to play a football game in about an hour, right? Like this is the gravity of what it is. It's global. It's a global headline making machine, and we have that degree of separation where if you live in the surrounding area in Newcastle, that's on your doorstep next year. Go out and see a game. It's a special thing.
It's remarkable, and if you know we were 1 year separated, and this was a year where the East held the final, there's like a legit chance that MacArthur get to the end and are hosting Cristiano Ronaldo at Campbelltown. Like that would have been a realistic possibility if we were in one of the years where the East hosts the final. Like,
yeah,
it is quite remarkable to speak about.